Hi guys, and welcome to the live stream. So I hope you're very well this evening. So what we're going to talk about tonight, of course, the welfare bill that's just passed through Parliament, or the second reading, or going to the second reading next time. Anyway, it's gone through Parliament. Starmer won it with a majority, but not a very big majority, and that's extremely concerning for him. We'll talk a little bit about that, of course. There's also Bernie Sanders and AI. I want to talk about that. Bob Villain, not Bob Dylan, but Bob the Villain. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then a few other stories as well. So obviously the big story of today is the welfare bill. So let's hear what Liz Kendall, so the Secretary of State for the DWP, had to say about this.
The Chancellors.
Look, I wish we had got to this point in a different way, and there are absolutely lessons to learn. But I think it's really important we've passed this bill for second reading. It puts in place some really important reforms to the welfare system, tackling work disincentives, making sure that people with severe conditions are no longer reassessed, and alongside our investment in employment support, this will help people get back to work, because that's the right future for them.
Is your position really tenable, though? You've been repeatedly humiliated in the last week.
You know, I think listening is actually a strength in politics.
Or did you listen to the backbenchers who said, don't? What I can't understand is why Labour actually did two things that were not in the manifesto. What does the Labour strategist know about the future? Know about the future to simply make things harder for the elderly and the disabled. Like, yeah, as you said, this was not part of the manifesto. What was the motivation behind making these cuts, or making it difficult for the elderly when it came to the winter fuel allowance, or the making it difficult for people to access PIP? What was the motivation behind that? You know, at the beginning he said, well, we have to do it, otherwise we'll crash the economy. Now they're doing it. So let me just go through some of the things, and then we'll come back to Liz Kendall in a moment. So some of the things that have survived this bill is a scaling down of universal credit reforms, new obligations for job seekers. So this is the bad news, okay? So there'll be more obligations on job seekers to take up employment. And, you know, I really don't understand this at a time when a number of companies have decided to switch from people to AI. 32% of first-time jobs are being outsourced to AI. Something like 32% of companies are considering relying on AI. And this is really serious, because young people, to get on the property ladder, normally take up very low-paying positions or junior positions. And if these jobs are being outsourced to AI, then it cuts the legs from under people who are trying to build a career, young people who are trying to build a career. So what's going to happen to them? Well, I have a clip on that from Bernie Sanders in a little bit later. So there'll be new obligations on job seekers. Fraud prevention tools. So they're going ahead with these fraud prevention. As we know, when it comes to PIP, there's zero fraud, literally zero fraud. You know, it doesn't even, like, the percentage is basically zero. It's like maybe 5 people or something like that out of thousands. So it's zero. Isn't it interesting that the government are talking about, and politicians keep banging on about, fraud within the welfare system, but never fraud when it comes to, I don't know, multimillionaires and billionaires or businesses? What about people who don't pay their taxes? Can't you go after them as opposed to going after, you know, a pittance that you can extract from the disabled? A formal PIP review. So there'll be a formal PIP review, but there'll be no cuts as of yet. Now, what's failed to get through was, of course, there'll be no immediate changes to PIP eligibility. So this is good news. So the government had planned to do this, and then at the last minute they decided to pull that. There'll be no major savings. So one of the things was, we need to save a lot of money because the welfare bill is too high. So there won't be any savings, and we'll get to that in a little bit as well. No aggressive reform to the sickness benefits. So this is, of course, really important, that it was not a case of making it more and more difficult for people to access the benefits they need. So politically, it's not going very well for the government. For people on benefits and people who are disabled, the news is a bit better than it could have been. And it should make some people feel a little bit more comfortable going forward. But of course, there are still pressures on people to take up employment, even if there is no real employment for them to take up, or there's no need for them to take up employment. Anyway, back to Liz Kendall, because I know you want to hear from her.
In life, and I'll continue to listen to colleagues.
You want to carry on?
Absolutely. You know, what was very interesting was
I think we're going to probably see a reshuffle after this.
How much support there was for the principle of reforming the welfare state, that those who can work should work but need help to do so, and that we need to protect those who can't work. The bill begins to make those changes alongside our welfare reforms.
And really myself and the whole Labour Party.
Well, there's some really important changes to universal credit, raising the standard allowance for the first time.
See, like the amount of changes are not really that valuable to the government. I'm not saying that it's terrible for a lot of people, but the actual benefit for the government is pretty much zero, because they said that they would save a huge amount of money by doing this because the welfare bill is too high, according to them. So the savings of 5.5 billion that they were supposed to extract from these reforms has disappeared. And what are you going to hear from the Conservatives? The Conservatives are going to say, you shouldn't be in charge of this. You're not saving any money. You push through a reform, but you're not saving any money. And the welfare bill is going to get bigger and bigger. Now, the Tories don't give a shit about people on benefits. They don't care about the welfare bill. They don't care about... No, Max, we don't want to hear from... She's like an evil version of Doddy. Dobby, yes. Dobby from Peep Show, yes. This is perfect. Anyone who knows Peep Show would appreciate that reference. We have guys from Politics Social. Great to see you on tonight. Time for Starmer to go and Andy Burnham to come in. This is really damaging to Starmer, I think. Morgan McSweeney has to go too. Has got to go. This is all on him. Well said, Ivan. Yes. I think there will be some sort of reshuffle. If it's not an... Dobby, lovely Dobby. No, but I think Morgan McSweeney has to go. He should not be driving this. He has been in the driving seat since the beginning, pretty much since the beginning. Before, what's her name? Sue Gray was employed. He was sort of running the show behind the scenes. And he's responsible for this. Like, where was the consultation? Surely there should have been consultation before and then consider these policies. But instead they did it the other way around. They went forward with the policies and then realized, we actually should consult people. And we didn't consult people. We will consult the backbenchers. And the backbenchers are saying, stop, don't do this. This is a disaster. So, Labour's enemies at the moment are rubbing their hands with glee.
Above inflation.
Okay, we'll leave Dobby for a moment. So how did the vote go? You can see here. So how did your MP vote? So it was 335 to 260. It's pretty bad. Just looking at some of who didn't vote. 55 didn't vote, so there were 55 abstentions. I'm just looking for Labour MPs who voted no. Paul Baker, Lee Barron, I don't know those people. Thurston Bell, no, he obviously voted yes. Hilary Benn, yes. Olivia Blake, I'm not familiar with her. There's so many Labour MPs, the new ones that came in at the last election, so I have to get familiar with them. And then obviously, Richard Bergen, he's on the left of the party. he's a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, so he obviously voted no because he was one of these rebels he was one of the rebels from the very beginning. Clive Lewis, let me see if I can find Clive Lewis. I'm sure Clive voted. Here we go. Clive Lewis voted no, so he voted against it. Which is good because I have a huge amount of respect for Clive Lewis and he was very vocal against these changes. I think there's also the possibility that many MPs voted against it knowing that nothing would happen to them. And that's right. There shouldn't have been a 3-line whip. There shouldn't have been a punishment for people voting against it. But it's pretty much a useless bill at this stage. Like it doesn't help people that much. And it doesn't achieve the goal that it was originally set out to achieve, which was, of course, to save the government a huge amount of money. Now, I don't agree with those savings, but it doesn't make anyone happy, really, because the government aren't happy because they haven't saved any money, and the MPs who are dead set against it are not happy because they think it goes too far. And then you have the Conservatives in the middle who are like, oh, well, you're not doing enough. We should be in charge. You got a better so you'd be better off getting ChatGPT just of running the UK. We may see that in the future. We don't, it's not guaranteed that we don't see something like that in the future. So I want to show you this clip from Sky News about the bill and about the savings or lack of.
Look, I think the last 48 hours have blown a massive black hole in Rachel Reeves' accounts. It's unclear how she's going to find.
Notice the language here, a black hole.
And maybe upwards of £10 billion to deal with all of the different problems that she's facing. Let me take you through some of the numbers. Now, back in March, look at this. Rachel Reeves has very tough fiscal rules, very tough borrowing limits, and she also...
No, I just want to respond to some of your comments first before we continue, because you guys make the show. It's not me, it's you guys. Will Starmer go this year? It's not looking good for him. I think he'll be okay with this one, but this guy is loving his job. Sam Coates loves that job. I don't know what he takes beforehand. I'd love some of it, but they can't tax the rich, Max. No, of course not. But will Starmer go this? I think he'll be okay. I think what they'll do is probably a reshuffle, and maybe Liz Kendall will be removed. But Rachel Reeves, I don't know. I think she will have to stay because we saw before, if you get rid of the Chancellor, the Prime Minister goes after. Keir Starmer doesn't give me the impression that he likes being Prime Minister. And especially with things like this, he should have been on the ball before. He should have known what was happening. And he wasn't. He didn't know what was happening behind the scenes. This isn't something that exploded at the last minute. This has been going on for months. So what the hell was he doing? Does he not have meetings with MPs? Even a 1-hour Zoom call once a week or even a few times a month, just to tell people, okay, this is what we're doing. Can we get some feedback from you? I know they have a lot of MPs, but not everyone would have to turn up for the Zoom call, but at least do something like that. You need to communicate because they will say, we can't go down this road where we're cutting people's benefit. And if you get a lot of people saying this, then you have to realize, okay, this is a policy that we can't be going forward with. This is a disaster. So I don't know if Starmer... he'd rather be a toolmaker, Max. He meets with the millionaires instead, not the average people. I was just thinking about this today. Shouldn't it be the job of the Foreign Secretary to meet with foreign leaders? Wouldn't it be better? And the Prime Minister stays at home and does the work, the domestic stuff. I understand it's important to have the Prime Minister on the world stage, but his eye is off the ball here, and this is a massive problem because, okay, he'll obviously, I think he'll survive this, of course, but the next time around, see, it creates two problems for the Prime Minister. One is it undermines the support that he has, and the second is the rebels will be out for blood. We saw it before with the ERG in the Conservative Party. The ERG steered the Conservative Party into the ditch. And I'm not saying I disagree with the rebels, but the rebels now in the Labour Party understand. And I've mentioned this before. As soon as there was this talk of a massive majority, I said, okay, what he's going to have to do is he's going to have to manage blocks within the party. At the moment, they haven't formed a unique bloc. But you may see this going forward between now and the next general election. Groups will understand, okay, we're able to shift the government in a particular direction. And you're going to see this. You're going to see blocs form, and they're going to demand concessions from the government, or they will rebel. And once again, you may say, well, what about just having a 3-line whip? Yes, but doing that creates a lot of problems for the party. And you force people into a position where they may defect to other parties. Are they really calling them rebels? I mean, like, really, rebels? Yes, they are actually called rebels. The country's in crisis. Labour should have put money into people's bank accounts, scrap tuition fees, high taxes on the rich. Yes, I agree 100. This is something I said at the very beginning. I don't know if you guys remember. I remember it, but I don't know if you guys remember me saying it. I said Rachel Reeves' decision to rely on growth was a massive mistake. She said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to rely on growth. The economy will grow. And with the growing economy, we're going to be able to fund public services. So we won't need to cut taxes, or we won't need to raise taxes, or we won't need to cut public services. And then obviously Donald Trump came along, and there were other crises as well. And then she found herself, oh, okay, now I have no headroom. My hands are tied. And I said at the time, you can't predict the future. What you need to do is you need to pump money into the economy. You need to take that risk. You need to decide, okay, what we need to do is borrow or tax the rich to cover the cost. Pump money into the economy. Pump money into people's pockets. Because you don't know what's happening you don't know, you can't predict the future. You can't rely on potential growth later on. And what's happened? Donald Trump came along, and we had these other crises, and now the economy's in the doldrums, and she's struggling to cover these extra costs. And what is she doing? She's trying to go down the austerity road, like, for example, when it came to welfare. So I think there's going to be a bit of a back and forth between the Prime Minister and the Treasury at the moment, because the Prime Minister wanted to. We don't even know what Keir Starmer wanted. But anyway, let's get back to Sam Coates, the excited man.
Pushes her spending right up to the limit. She's just £9.9 billion away from breaching her fiscal rules. And anything that requires more spending will take chunks out of this, what's known as headroom, the kind of wiggle room that she has. Now, in order to achieve that £9.9 billion of wiggle room back in March, she had to look at the welfare budget, because the welfare budget is ballooning. Look at this. Under the original plans before March, it was going to be £70 billion by 2030 on incapacity and disability benefits. So what Rachel Reeves and Liz Kendall did was initially they said, well, we think that by 2030 we can bring it down to £65 billion a year. Now, over the last 48 hours, the government decided first to compromise some of the way by exempting people currently on personal independent payments. That would have meant a bit smaller savings, something roughly in between. But over the last 24 hours, that has proved unsustainable, as Beth was saying, because of the scale of the revolt of the parliamentary party. And they're going to save, we expect, virtually nothing. And now look at this. So this is where Rachel Reeves has been left. Since March, she's faced a huge number of problems. First of all, some of that headroom, that wiggle room, has been eaten up by the winter fuel allowance U-turn roughly a month ago. Secondly, worse economic conditions, partly because of Donald Trump's tariffs, partly because of lower growth in the UK. Well, that's eaten up another $4 billion. But look,
I really don't understand. Frederick, thank you so much for that super chat. As you say previously, Brexit damaged the UK. Yes, and I really don't understand why the government isn't blaming Brexit here. It's not going to fix anything, but at least you'd be able to say, look, the reason we're in this disaster is because of the Tories and Reform UK, Nigel Farage. You want to put all your faith in Nigel Farage to run the economy, to run the country. Well, he delivered Brexit. He was Mr. Brexit. And the reason we're in this disaster is in part because of him. Blue Badger says, I remember you saying that you think that if she's fragile, she'll be fragile. And if things change, she'll be screwed. I think those were the words. Pretty much, yes. Thanks, Frederick. But it's... if she raised taxes on the rich, that would cover a lot of this. Not all of it, but it would cover a lot of it. Why isn't she doing that? Instead, she came out recently and said, what we need to do is we need to protect multimillionaires and billionaires because they're the wealth creators. Well, they're not.
Look at this, the biggest chunk that has eaten away at her headroom, £5.5 billion, is the Sky estimate of how much the U-turns over the last 24 hours and 48 hours have cost. That is the scale, we believe, of the welfare-saving black hole. And what does that mean, Sophie? That means right now that Rachel Reeves is on course to breach her fiscal rules.
Oh, God. Once again, she put herself into the straitjacket. There was no reason for her to set these fiscal rules. Now, her argument was, well, we need to show the markets that we're in charge, that we're fiscally responsible. But there was no need for this. This was arbitrary. Oh, Ivan, thank you so much for that super chat. Ivan says, Kemi Badenoch was a disgrace today. She said, thank goodness the Tories were in power during COVID. Heartless, thoughtless narcissist. We all know the truth about the Tories' mishandling of COVID. And I didn't see that. I want to see that probably tonight or tomorrow. Because I'm flabbergasted by Kemi Badenoch. Once again, just regurgitating talking points. And does she actually remember what happened during the pandemic? When Boris Johnson, at the very beginning, refused to attend COBRA meetings. He refused to wear a mask most of the time, and then eventually he was doing that. I was very critical of that. You know, these small things that the government could have done to encourage people. And then, of course, the disaster upon disaster of Partygate, where Boris Johnson was writing the rules, telling people what to do, and then breaking them himself. And lying about it in Parliament, lying about it on TV, lying about it in interviews, lying about it constantly. And of course, this undermined trust in the government. And what it did was it created a massive amount of distrust between the public and politicians. And what you need during a pandemic or a crisis like that, you need the public to trust the government. Because the government is supposed to tell people, what to do, is supposed to make difficult decisions. The government is there to try and, we hope that they would look after the most vulnerable to make sure that the country is protected. But if you don't have trust in the government, then people are not going to follow the rules. They're not going to do, they won't engage in behavior that's designed to protect them because they won't trust the government to do it. And Boris Johnson and the Tories undermined trust on so many levels. And it's not just the Tories that people don't trust anymore, it's politicians in general. Completely destroyed trust. Once again, what the Tories did, we can't even measure the amount of damage they did. Not just to the economy, but to society and politics and public trust. Trust in politics and trust in institutions. Thanks, Ivan. I've said before, I'm not Jeremy Corbyn's biggest fan, but Jeremy Corbyn would have been infinitely better as Prime Minister than Boris Johnson. I'm setting the bar very low there. I like Jeremy Corbyn as an individual. I think some of his approach to politics was problematic. The policies, I like the policies. The individual, how he deals with in interviews, how he deals with the press, how he deals with. I'd love to have him on. I'm trying to get an interview with him, and we could try and ask him about some of these things. There were opportunities for him to convince people who were sitting on the fence or people who had a negative image of him to change that. But that's water under the bridge. Anyway, But, you know, anyone, a potted plant would have been better than Boris Johnson. Jeremy Corbyn had principles, yes. Are there politicians you can trust? But they're kept on a very tight leash, yes. There are Anyway, back to the excited man.
Fiscal rules, the borrowing limit, she said, was ironclad. By November, she is going to have to find somewhere in the region of £11 billion. £11 billion in order to come back into the black and to restore that 9.9 billion.
Just get rid of the fiscal rules. Like, they shouldn't have been there in the first place. But she's not going to get rid of them because that would be embarrassing. So she's probably going to find cuts somewhere else. But where?
Which we think is the minimum that she would have. So that is a huge sum of money. And the question is, where's it going to come from? She's just agreed loads of spending with her colleagues. So that's going to be quite hard to take it out of welfare, out of Whitehall departments. She has also promised that it's going to be very hard to take it out of the welfare budget, given what's happened today. She has promised not to breach her ironclad fiscal rules. But I want you to look at this. Mel Stride, the Tory Shadow Chancellor, today just double-checked that she still believed in her own fiscal rules. Look at this exchange between him and
Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor has also said that her fiscal rules are ironclad and non-negotiable. So could she reconfirm that commitment now, or are we heading for yet another U-turn?
Well, it would be a bit more, take it a bit more seriously if the party opposite weren't actually voting against the welfare reforms this evening, and if they hadn't committed to fully reverse the winter fuel changes, which is going to cost a further £400 million that they can't explain.
Well, you heard there.
Okay, she didn't answer the question. So, are these fiscal rules ironclad?
We'd rather you didn't hear Rachel Reeves recommit to her fiscal rules. It seems inconceivable to me that she would junk them because the markets would start to question just how sustainable Britain's massive debt pile, more than 100%.
What an ridiculous, unforced error. What I mean by that is there was no need to have these fiscal rules. There was no need to stick to the fiscal rules. Like, for example, when it comes to defence spending, the European Union instructed member states, look, if you want to borrow money for defence spending, it will not impact, the rules that we have set in place for European economies. Now, Rachel Reeves could have done something similar, but she decided against that. Why? I don't understand. Like, she could say these aspects of the economy are exempt from the fiscal rules. They're her fiscal rules. She can decide. Now, why is she not doing this? Is it she doesn't understand? I don't think that's the case. Is it that she's afraid that the Tories will complain about it? Well, the Tories are pretty much a non-entity at the moment. So, is it the markets? Does she truly believe that the markets will punish her, like Liz Truss, if she changes her fiscal rules? The times have changed. Donald Trump is in the White House now. Donald Trump is creating massive uncertainty. So she could point to that and say, look, we need to change these fiscal rules. But why the hell did she say that they were ironclad at the very, very beginning? Why did she say we're not? She could have said something like, look, we have these rules that we're going to follow, but they are adaptable. They will change according to the conditions. We can't predict the future. She may have appeared a bit wishy-washy, but that would have put her in a position where she could change them later. And most people, even the Conservatives behind closed doors, would say, yeah, of course you have to change it because Donald Trump's in charge now. Because there's war in the Middle East. Because the situation is changing. It doesn't make any sense anyway. Labour welfare cuts Dickensian and from another era, says rebel MP ahead of vote. So this was before the vote took place. This was, I forget her name. Well, how is it possible I forgot her name? Yeah, Rachel Maskell, sorry. Rachel said this.
For I am my brother's keeper. These are my constituents, my neighbours, my community, my responsibility, and I cannot cross by on the other side. for one, let alone for the 150,000 who will be pushed further into poverty.
I'm really disappointed. Sorry, I'll bring the screen back in a moment. But I'm really disappointed with Stephen Timms, the Minister for Welfare for the DWP, not the Secretary of State, but he's the Minister. Because when he was in opposition, you'll see him down on the screen in a moment. When he was in opposition, he was a powerful voice for the disabled. I saw him in many select committees. And I thought, well, this guy is going to be on the side of the most vulnerable. And then he gets into power and he sort of acts a bit like a Tory. It was really disappointing. He started speaking like one as well. Paula, thank you so much for that super chat. The question on defense is to build our own industry so we don't need to buy from the US. Yes, that's a very valid point. ND says, first live stream I've actually caught. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, and great to see you on the live stream tonight. But yeah, Paul is correct. Thanks so much, Paula. If you build your own, then you can create jobs and become self-sufficient. And of course, you don't have to rely on the United States, which is a little bit unreliable at the moment.
And as so many of us fear, and as the evidence shows, since 600 people took their lives under the Tories' brutal reforms, the tragedy of this ideology could be worse.
This is so important, that people took their lives because of government policies. As I keep saying on this channel, I keep saying it and I'll keep saying it. What is the point of a government if it doesn't look after the most vulnerable in society? Honestly, what is the point of a government? No one should be in a situation where they have to where they feel the only way out is to take their lives. These are policies. People know what, when they vote on a policy or when they form a policy, the impact it will have. If they don't, then they should actually reach out to stakeholders. They should reach out to charities and organizations to say, okay, how will this policy impact the people the people who rely on it? How will people be impacted by this? How will society be impacted? And then create the policy. Don't create the policy first and then hope that, well, we just get it through Parliament. This is the problem with the politics of it. I really wish we could move away from partisan politics. We could have a society where politicians voted freely on policies, didn't have to worry about party whip and whatever. They would vote based on their conscience. And there would be consensus across Parliament on so many issues. We have seen it on a number of occasions, but you could count them on one hand. But there should be more consensus. And in a sense, we shouldn't have political parties. We should have MPs representing their constituents and doing the best for their constituents. MPs would vote, in a uniform way when it's a policy that is beneficial to all. Blue Labour has a lot to answer for too. Well said, Ivan. Yes. Blue Labour is the one that's driving these policies. So Blue Labour, of course, being the right wing of Labour, or more moderate version of Labour, if you want to use that term. It's not the left; it's the right within Labour. It's the Blairites. They want to see. I really don't understand why they're in the Labour Party in the first place, because their ideology is more Tory, like as in the colour blue. Anyway, back to this one.
So I will fight for the purpose of politics, for their livelihoods and their lives. It is a matter of conscience, deep conscience for me, to ensure that these precious people are treated for once with dignity, so they matter for being and not just doing.
Well said. Matter for being, not just doing. And this should be the fundamental core belief of Labour. We look after those who are doing, but also those who are being. People who are working, but also people who are not working. Maybe because they can't, or because they have decided to look after an elderly relative or somebody who needs care. Guys, let's lighten the mood a little bit, and we'll go to a comedy moment. hopefully this will lighten the mood a little bit. Once again, within this bill, there has been some things that have been watered down, so it won't have the same impact. But of course, unfortunately, there are also negative parts when it comes to forcing more people into jobs. And I'm extremely critical of this because many jobs are being outsourced to AI at the moment. Many jobs are going to disappear, and the government needs to change its approach. And on that, before we go to the funny video, I want to say that I have finally, I have reached out to an individual who is an expert on UBI. So we will be doing an interview as soon as possible on UBI, hopefully this week, and I'll have it out this week as well. So what I'll do is I'll post something on the channel community page if you'd like to post some questions for my expert. I'll leave some more information about him so you can check him out. And we'll finally get talking about UBIs. I've been promising it for years, literally years, but now it's finally happening. Anyway, let's have a listen to this. Hopefully it's quite fun.
There are a lot of stereotypes about the Irish people. I'm going to list them in order of their accuracy. Number 5, the Irish are friendly. This is the most offensive and untrue of them all. Irish people are nice. That's sort of like being friendly, but you don't mean it. If an Irish person says, hello, how are you doing? That means I've noticed you exist. Now, please leave me alone. I learned from one of my American friends that sometimes people ask a question and they actually care and want to hear about your life. I didn't know what to do, so I just had to cry and I let them buy all my pints. Number 4, Irish people fucking curse too much. Don't be a soft cunt. Words don't hurt people, bad ideas do. Number 3, we hate the English. I don't judge you for your hobbies. Number 2, all we do is drink. No, every time we do something, we have a little drink as well. And number 1, Irish men have absolutely massive fucking heads. That's true. Follow.
It's true. It's true. We have massive heads. Look at the size. Look at the size of this hat. Okay. Okay, moving on,
we also
guys.
have news of another key.
So, in the United States, perhaps they're having worse news than Keir Starmer is having. So have a listen to this.
But we also have news of another key vote, this time across the Atlantic in the United States, where the US Senate has just passed President Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Vice President J.D. Vance cast the tie-breaking vote for it to go through the Senate. That's after 3 Republicans, along with every Democrat, voted against the bill. It is legislation which contains key elements of Donald Trump's agenda, and the bill now goes back to the House of Representatives for further consideration, where it is very likely to face something of an uphill battle to get all the Republicans there on board ahead of Donald Trump's self-imposed deadline, which is July the 4th. Let's talk again to our North America correspondent, Anthony Zerka, who's with me in the studio because he's visiting London at the moment. So good to have you with us. Well, we've already had Donald Trump's reaction to this, haven't we?
We have. He said it's music to my ears. Obviously, he's very pleased by this. It was a big hurdle for this bill to overcome, getting all the senators to agree. There were 4 no votes, it seemed, for all of today. They finally twisted some arms. Lisa Murkowski, the senator from Alaska, switched over to their side. They added provisions that gave some subsidies on health insurance to poor Alaskans, and that won her over. And so now, as you mentioned, it goes back to the House of Representatives. They had already approved it one time, but now they're going to have to deal with these changes that the Senate put in.
Just explain to us once again why, he calls it, they call it the big, beautiful bill. What is in it? Why is it so central to Donald Trump's presidency?
Well, there was a decision made months ago that to get Donald Trump's legislative agenda through, all the things he promised on the campaign trail last year, they were going to package it into one big, beautiful bill. They were going to do this all in one go, which presented a certain number of challenges because of everything contained in here. There'd be people who had problems with different things and would pick it apart, but it contains the heart of Donald Trump's agenda. That's a boosting by $70 billion immigration enforcement on border walls and new detention.
70 billion, not 70 million, 70 billion to be spent on border security.
Centers and new immigration officers, over $100 billion in new military spending for this goal.
Because, what the United States needs is more military spending. Okay, it's like, yeah, we need to spend more on the military because the military spending is dangerously low. Donald Trump promised to spend $1 trillion on the military. He met with soldiers as if it was like the soldiers who were going to get a pay rise or something. And he was like meeting with the soldiers going, I'm going to spend $1 billion, $1 trillion on the military. Obviously, it doesn't go into their pockets. It goes into the pockets of the military industrial complex. It doesn't actually go into the pockets of ordinary people. So it will be, of course, spent on military hardware and pork. Not the type that Liz Truss talks about.
Golden Dome missile defense that Donald Trump talks about, and making tax cuts that Trump and the Republicans passed in his first term permanent.
And there we go. The tax cuts. The tax cuts are for the rich. So the rich get what? The rich are happy because they pay less in tax. And everyone else is getting ready to suffer.
And adding new tax cuts for no taxes on tip income, no taxes.
Wow. Okay, that's going to really make... Like, you won't have a job in the future, but if you do, we won't tax your tips. Okay, do people understand what's coming down the road? Honestly, we're moving away from physical work. The people that Donald Trump has surrounded himself with want to destroy the labor market. They want to replace people with robots. And it's not, this is coming in 20 years' time. No, this is right now. This is happening right now. People are going to be replaced. People are being replaced. There was a story in the Guardian just yesterday, I think it was, and I covered it on a short, where it was like 32% or something of businesses are no longer hiring young people. They're relying on AI to do the work. This is before we have a gentle AI where you have an agent who can actually go out and do the work. This is just relying on ChatGPT. This is really before the real stuff starts. BBB is the US credit rating. This bill will cause, yes, a BBB minus. Thanks, Brad. Donald Trump wants to destroy the economy. His tariffs haven't succeeded. Well, the big beautiful bill will. This is insane.
On overtime income that Donald Trump promised while he campaigned last year. So all of it is bundled up into one thing. It's paid for in part by...
What Donald Trump is doing is like hitting somebody over the head with a shovel and then giving them a little sweet and saying, here, I've given you a sweet. Just ignore me hitting you over the head a number of times with a shovel.
Cuts to some social programs like Medicaid, which is a health insurance program for low-income Americans, and it adds.
And they're also planning to cut a trillion. Once again, I'm using the wrong figures here. $1 trillion is going to be cut. So $1 trillion goes to the military, and $1 trillion taken away from Medicaid. It started out at something like 700 billion, but I think it's actually closer to $1 trillion now. BBB will make Liz Truss' budget look good. That's the effect it will have, of course. It will make Liz Truss look like Mark Carney. It's insane. 4.5% tax increase on the poor, 0.1% tax increase on the rich. Do the Americans care? People, once again, the problem here is the media. The media will convince people, no, look at the border. It's the border. Quick, look at the border. It's the immigrants. The immigrants are the problem. The immigrants are coming to take your jobs. The immigrants are coming to take your homes. They're coming to take your cats and dogs and eat them. The public are easily distracted, and the media are very good at distracting people. So unfortunately, many people will, when they do wake up and smell the coffee, it will be too late. Thanks, Firecard. Thanks for that.
It's about $3 trillion to the national debt, which is one of the reasons some senators like Rand Paul had objections to it.
And also Elon Musk.
I love how Rand Paul, Rand Paul is one of these libertarians. He's more concerned with the public debt. The public debt is going to go through the roof, as opposed to we're going to cut Medicaid for the most vulnerable in society. Like I've mentioned it before on the channel, where there was support for a thing called SNAP, which is like food stamps, which are, you know, support for people to buy food. This was being cut. Support for housing. So the poorest in society who get a bit of support to pay their rent, that's going to be cut. So you're going to have a massive amount of people unemployed, and you're going to have a massive amount of people who are sick. And what the Republicans are just looking at this going, wonderful, dead poor people or poor dead people. That's what we love. We don't care about, you know, this is what I hate about the Republican Party. And I'm going on a bit of a rant. I'm sorry, I have to do this. What I really hate about the Republican Party in the US is that they claim to be pro-life. How is it pro-life to cut people's Medicaid? How is it pro-life to remove support for people who can't even pay their rent? How is that pro-life? You know what life means? Do Republicans actually know what life means? Life doesn't just exist in the womb. It exists outside it as well. How is it possible that they move mountains? Obviously, it's because they hate women, but officially, they move mountains to protect the most vulnerable in the womb, the fetus, the unborn. But as soon as they're out of the womb, fuck you. That's the approach the Republican Party have. You know, you're on your own. Or worse, we're going to make your life more difficult. You know, your previous generation had it quite tough. Well, we're going to make it even more difficult. Why? Because we hate poor people. They hate poor people. Why do they hate poor people? I don't know. I would love to know the psychology behind that. Like Republican. And poor people are voting for the Republican Party because they're being told, well, you know, you're poor, but that immigrant is coming to take your cat, dog and eat it. That immigrant is coming to take your job. That immigrant is coming to take your home. Don't look up, look down. Sorry, I went on a rant and I missed my super chat, but here we are now. Ivan, thank you so much for that. A big beautiful bill. My 2-year-old niece talks better than Trump. This is something isn't it fascinating when you watch Donald Trump, you know, sitting at in the Oval Office, and he has with him a foreign leader, you know, maybe the head of NATO or an Arab leader or whatever, and the foreigner speaks English better than Donald Trump. It's like, how is that possible? How is it possible that the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands speaks English to a higher degree than Donald Trump? How is it possible that an Arab leader, maybe the Emir of Qatar, his English is better than Donald Trump's? How is that possible? I don't know. But yes, your 2-year-old niece would talk better than Donald Trump. Fascinating that Eisenhower saw the danger of the military-industrial complex. Well said, Paula. He did. Thanks, Ivan and Paula. He knew the trouble was down the road. He knew trouble was ahead. I'm starting to sound a bit like Trump now. I should shut up. You missed my super chat. Paula, no. Did I miss another one before? But I answered it now, so hopefully there's a bit of a delay on the stream. But this is really... do you think the midterms will be a blue rising fire card? If Donald Trump doesn't cancel them, I think that a lot of Republicans are now coming out and criticizing Donald Trump. This is why there wasn't such a huge amount of support for this big, beautiful bill in the Senate, because many senators and congressmen as well, congresswomen as well, some of them are getting to the end of their tenure or their time in power or in politics. They're retiring, I should say. They're retiring soon, so they have nothing to lose. And some of them have voted against this because they knew they had nothing to lose. So this gives me the impression that, yes, the Republicans will face a bloodbath in 2026. Now, something really important is, once again, this AI thing. I can't get away from this, but we're going to see massive disruption, and we're going to have to see something like a UBI or some sort of support for people. Otherwise, there will be chaos. And whoever presents that will be ahead of the curve, and they will be able to. So if the Democrats come out and say, look, we need to have support for people, we need to have a UBI, we need to have proper measures in place, and the Republicans are against that, I think the Republicans are finished. When it comes to will the Democrats, I under normal circumstances, yes. So the president normally does really badly in the first midterm. So Donald Trump, it's so weird now because Donald Trump, second time president, but normally the sitting president does really badly in the first midterm. So Donald Trump would likely do badly. But once again, there's going to be a lot of manipulation of the voting system, and it's not just the technology part of it. It's also the making it difficult for ethnic minorities or Latinos or African Americans or whoever to come out and vote. The poor as well to come out and vote. The Republicans will throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at blocking people from exercising their right. We've seen it before, and they'll do it again. And now with social media and AI, I think they're going to turn it right up to 11 because they'll be so desperate to hold on to power. But I think if the Democrats have their heads screwed on, which I don't have a huge hope for, if they do, they will be able to anticipate these things and they will try and organize around them. And this is important for the Democrats to plan now, not wait until, a week before as they normally do. Oh, look, Donald Trump is being an absolute arsehole. Now we better do something. No, you need to be doing the planning right now. The Democrats should be preparing for every possible scenario when it comes to the midterms. But it's also possible that Donald Trump will cancel them. He looked for, we need to go to war with North Korea. We have to cancel the midterms. Sorry. Crisis. Sorry. I wouldn't put it past him because he's a lying charlatan. Thanks for that. Hopefully Zoran shifts the Dems towards socialism. The Good Globalist, thank you so much for that as well. I'm so impressed with Mandami. What's wonderful about it as well is how, the mainstream media are like, let's get this guy on to expose him. These people have never heard of Nigel frigging Farage, and I mean that in a positive way for Mamdani, because what he's pushing is something I agree with. But the media seem to think, let's get him on and we'll expose him as a communist or whatever. And what they're doing instead is he's saying like we should have free public transport, things like this, rent controls, and normal people are like, that's actually a good idea. Well, the talking heads and the political commentators and the rich are saying like, that's ridiculous, free transport. This guy's insane. No one's going to vote for that lunacy. Who wants free transport? Because they don't benefit from that. But ordinary people do. So I think, once again, I keep saying you need to have a vision for ordinary people. But you also have to rely on the incumbent falling apart. But if you have a vision for the future, this is why Keir Starmer is doing so badly. He doesn't have a vision. What is Keir Starmer's vision? We're not the Tories. Okay, that's it. You have to be able to sell something to the public. Have to. If I said Nigel Farage vision or issue immigration, people will say that the Tories corruption. Okay, maybe not the best one, but the Green Party environment. SNP, independence, Plaid, devolution, maybe eventually independence. DUP, dinosaurs. Whatever political party you present, they should have. You can associate something with them. With the Labour Party today, what do you associate with the Labour Party? Workers, most vulnerable in society, the disabled. No, you don't really associate these things, and that's the problem. Ivan again, thank you so much, Ivan. Max, the Tories in the UK are no different to the US Republicans. The Tories have the same contempt and disdain for poor people. And I agree 100%. What I don't understand about the Republicans is the Conservatives are like the upper class. They represent the upper class. Okay, let's not beat around the bush. They represent, look at Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example. So you can sort of understand why the Tories hate the poor, because it's a class thing. The upper class despise the middle class and the working class. So the Conservatives, who are the party of the upper class, obviously hate poor people, and they think rich people should have more and poor people should have less. But the Republican Party, you don't have a class system like that in the United States. So I honestly don't... Is it because about tax? They're like this, the rich, as I keep saying, the rich hate paying taxes, and the rich hate those taxes going to fund the lives of ordinary people or poor people. Maybe this is why the Republicans hate the poor, because they hate the idea of somebody getting some of their money. You know, it's not their money, it's money going into a pot for a civilized society, but they prefer this, it's all mine. If I make money, it should all be mine, and none of it should go in tax. Well, this is the libertarian approach, but Republicans are very much closer to libertarianism than the Democrats are, of course. Well, the Democrats are more, they're not left, okay? They're neoliberal, but they understand the need for, a welfare state. They understand the need for taxes. They understand the need for, police service and military, to be funded through taxes in order to have a civilized society. They understand that, you have to redistribute some of the wealth. They're not socialists, okay, the Democrats. They're much more like the Conservatives in Britain than the Labour Party or the Liberal Democrats. Thanks, Ivan, for that. Oh, we have another super chat from Brad. APAC's mental gymnastics on Mamdani's answer about foreign trips was so intense. They made Putin look humble and honest. Yeah, so he said that when it... So this was really interesting. So Mamdani, so obviously if you don't know who he is, he's running to be mayor of New York. He was on a stage with others doing a debate, and so each of the other candidates was asked, "What's the first country? Which first country would you visit if you became mayor of New York, or if you were president, or whatever?" And all of the other candidates, I believe, said Israel. And Mamdani said, "No, I would stay in New York because the people of New York need me more than people in other countries." It's like, and it was a perfect answer because he didn't, he was tuned in enough to understand not to give the sort of, boilerplate response. He knew I don't give the fixed response. The fixed response is, yes, I go to visit Israel because they are our greatest ally. There, done and dusted. No, he actually has a brain. It's not just filled with politics. He actually has a brain. And he said, no, I wouldn't go anywhere. I'd stay in New York because the people of New York want a mayor, and they want a mayor who's actually going to work for them. It was a wonderful answer. And you even had people on the right, the far right, who are like going, well, yeah, that was a good answer. They didn't say, oh, he's going to throw Israel under a bus. No, because he was prioritizing the people of New York as mayor of New York. Thanks, Brad. Anyway, guys, we're almost at the end of the stream, so I just want to cover one final thing before we go. As I said at the beginning, there are a few politicians who have their heads screwed on, and Bernie Sanders is one of them, as you can probably guess. This is what he was saying about AI.
What I worry about right now is I think artificial intelligence is going to displace millions and millions of workers. People are going to be thrown out on the streets. I think the corporate guys who are running these companies could care less about these workers. I think robotics is going to be running a lot of the factories in America. And I think these are issues we just have got to address in a bold way. What I worry about...
Bernie is my favorite boomer. Like, he knows what's going on. So he mentioned here about robots, and he mentioned about AI and how AI is going to benefit the owners of it. It's not going to benefit ordinary people. There's still time to steer ourselves. Humanity, it's not just about the United States, it's about humanity. Steer humanity in the right direction. Unfortunately, the people at the steering wheel at the moment are like Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, Mark Zuckerberg is potentially going to become the next ruler of the universe because he's investing a huge amount of money in stealing the best people to run AI for Facebook, Meta. Meta is the new company, but basically Facebook. I think Bernie's actually too old to be a boomer, maybe. Actually, you're right. No, but he was... I think he was young enough to go to Vietnam. He didn't go to Vietnam, but he protested against it. So maybe he is a boomer. Maybe he's a little bit... He's like he's borderline. Okay. And I mean that in a positive way. But he knows what's going on. And it's great to hear someone like Bernie Sanders who knows, who's tuned into these things. He knows that AI is not going to benefit ordinary people unless we do something about it. And he knows that robots are going to replace a lot of jobs. So when Donald Trump and others say, we're going to bring back jobs, well, you're not going to bring back jobs for people. You may bring back some jobs for robots, but that's not. So if there's a company that has robots producing everything, how are ordinary people going to benefit from that? That leads into the the UBI thing that I hope to speak to a guy called Scott later this week about. We need to have a backup plan. We need to have a plan B. Rage against the machine, well said. There will be a sort of Luddite, neo-Luddite response to this, but Luddites don't succeed in the end. So we'll have to embrace this. And you can think about pretty much any job. I don't want to end on a doomer sort of thing, but we could think about any job, and eventually it could be outsourced to AI, including YouTuber. But seriously, you can think of pretty much some jobs are going to be more difficult to outsource, but eventually we're going to get to a stage where the AI is as clever as all of humanity put together by 10 or by 50, and we're not going to have people doing. We have to prepare for that. We have to prepare for post-labor economics. We need to prepare for a situation after the AI is taken over. So what do? We spend time together in communes. We read stories to each other. We create stuff for each other, something like that. But we need to be prepared. We need to have an economy that is providing people with the means to live, and not just the means to live, but to have a good life. So we're at a sort of crossroads. Do we take the more utopian approach where, yes, somebody will be running the show, but at least ordinary people will be looked after? Or do we take a more dystopian one where the AI is unaligned to our goals and it's not looking after us? It's ignoring us. It's doing whatever it wants and we're being left behind. And then when we become in conflict with it, it decides to get rid of us, because we're either a problem. There was an analogy given, and I thought it was very interesting. And then we'll finish on that. An anthill and an architect. So an architect or an engineer is building a skyscraper, and they approach an anthill. Do they move the skyscraper in order to protect the anthill, or do they just ignore the anthill? And this is what we're talking about when it comes to this sort of super intelligent AI. It is the architect, it is the engineer. Will they consider us, or will they treat us like an anthill? This is why it's so important for us to decide now. And we have the means to decide now. We need to put pressure as citizens on our governments and governments on these private corporations, the private companies like OpenAI or Meta or Microsoft or Google. We need to put pressure on them to make sure that they look after humanity. Because if they don't, it could all end. So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream. So I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on tonight. Thank you so much for your super chats and your support. If all goes well, tomorrow evening, hope you can attend. Tomorrow evening, I will have a special live stream with Zoe Gardner. Hopefully you can see that. We're going to do it live, so she'll respond to your questions in real time. Hopefully everything goes well and we won't have any problems. And it'll be on at 7 p.m. UK time. So 8 p.m. European Central Time. So there is a link. Sorry, there is a post on the community page. So don't forget about that. just being replaced by a robot, I'll be back. Thanks, Peter. Well said. So before we go, I hope you enjoyed this one. As always, it's quite funny.
London is a very dangerous city these days. You're never more than 4 metres away from a right-wing grifter who's making a video about how bad London is. You'll be able to recognise them by their lack of facts, their annoying presentation style, and their insistence on filming things in landscape. Sure, they've hired an intern and they've downloaded CapCut, but does that mean they deserve to make videos? No, it doesn't. Social media is a very powerful tool, and therefore it shouldn't be used by powerful tools. Get it? Tool? That's good stuff, that. This has potential to make London a no-go zone, because nobody wants to go in a place where people are doing this. Crime, immigrants, graffiti, dog poo, lime bikes, women, wine, pedestrians. That's the train. You hear how loud that is? Ouchies. They haven't finished that yet, have they? That's dirty. London. Now it's windy. That's another problem, isn't it? Ah, the wind. Ow. In the course of making this video, I've been stabbed 6 times and my phone has been stolen. Look at that graffiti. I mean, it speaks for itself. It's not like I chose to film it in this place. Could have filmed it in a nice park or by a canal or in a beer garden, but nah, chose to film it here, didn't I? If these right-wing grifters want to come to this city, they're going to have to adapt to the culture. The culture of not being an insufferable prick. These people claim to care about this city, but all they really care about is their own likes and views, unlike me, a brave comedian who is very brave. Please, for the love of God, share this video or I'll...
So guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. Or I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully, with Zoe. And have a great evening, great night, and take care. See you soon.